Thank you very much indeed, John. Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I speak at a lot of industry conferences, and normally you come in the morning to a gathering like this and you have 400 hangovers looking back at you. And so then you can get away with making a fairly pedestrian speech, and nobody will notice. The trouble with addressing this intimidating gathering is that you've all been in the gym, haven't you, since 6 o'clock this morning? So, 6 of them. Oh, you've already done it. Oh, well, you've got... So anyway, some of you are alert and expecting big things, so I'll try not to disappoint. And already my morning has been made by the sight of Anna Soubry addressing the mass ranks of the TUC, which is something I'm not going to forget in a hurry. So I want to talk today about sport and physical activity. And actually I'm bringing quite a serious message, which I hope will spur the government into action. London 2012 proved many things about our country, but, and don't be shocked when I say this, it also revealed something good about our politicians and our politics. It showed that when we work together with a clear goal, we can achieve much more for our country than even we thought possible, and certainly the doubters thought would happen. The question for us now then, after the Olympics, is a different one. Are we prepared to apply this same cross-party approach to an even bigger challenge? That is, building a much more active and healthier nation. A few months ago, somebody warned that the Olympics was in danger of being a great 4 weeks on TV, but not much else. Now, that wasn't an Olympic skeptic, that was Jeremy Hunt. Now, Jeremy and I don't agree on much to do with the National Health Service, but he was right to say this. It was an apt and timely warning. And sadly, I believe it's now in real danger of coming true. Britain is in real danger of missing the Olympic moment. Things are going backwards. School sport is in retreat, as figures from the England and Wales Cricket Board showed last week. Physical activity levels are stalling after years of increasing. And this means that while we may have topped the medals table in the summer, we remain rooted to the bottom of the international activity league table of the most active nations in the world. Obesity, sadly, is rising. Jeremy gave his warning as Culture Secretary. Since then, he has now joined me in becoming only the second British politician to make the move from the Culture Department to the Health Department. That's interesting, as it puts him on the spot. He is now the man in government with the direct power to stop his own warning coming true. If anything should puncture the post-Olympic self-congratulatory mood, then surely it must be the OECD obesity update published last week. The report found, and get ready for this, England, the most obese nation in Europe. Just let me say that again, the most obese nation in Europe. If that doesn't shock us out of our complacency, then I don't know what can. Alarm bells should be ringing in Whitehall, but from my experience of it, I suspect they probably won't be. Despite the Minister's good speech and good intentions today, I don't see any real evidence of the government getting to grips with this. I don't see any real evidence of the government getting tougher with the food industry. And meanwhile, physical activity remains an orphan policy in Whitehall. I tried to adopt it when I was Health Secretary, moving to the Department of Health from the Department of Culture. But the minute I was out of the door, the civil servants at the Department of Health decided to put it back into care. The trouble is, no department sees physical activity as core business. When I asked the Commons Library recently to tell me which government department has lead responsibility for physical activity, they couldn't. Now that says it all. And actually, it just got a whole lot worse. Making real change means uniting all of the relevant government departments with a stake in this issue and uniting them with a common purpose. That means health, education, local government, culture. One of Jeremy Hunt's first actions as Health Secretary was to abolish the Public Health Cabinet Subcommittee, the main forum in Whitehall for bringing all of these departments together. Now, apparently, the reason for doing this was because nobody was turning up at it. And what a depressing state of affairs, and what the wrong response to that poor attendance rate. So I see inertia setting in. I see departments retreating to their default positions, and sport is lacking a driving force, a passionate advocate around the cabinet table. We need to do something different. So today, I'm going to propose just that. I will write to Jeremy Hunt today, continuing the Olympic spirit of cross-party cooperation, to urge him to use the power he now has to stop his own warning coming true. My suggestion to the Health Secretary is a simple one. Why don't we agree a new cross-party national ambition for a more physically active nation? Today, around a quarter of British adults are physically active. Could we not set a goal that by, say, 2025, we could lift that to a half, like the neighbouring countries who are similar to us, the Netherlands, Denmark, Finland, Germany? And if we can agree it across the parties, then surely we might be able to ask the whole country to sign up behind that goal too. Business, charities, broadcasters, local government, voluntary and community organisations, individual citizens. And I want to pay tribute. I'm proud actually to be at your relaunch today. We worked in government with the Fitness Industry Association. Great to see you taking on a new lease of life today with the new UK Active, I've got that right, haven't I? The UK Active brand. You played your part and you helped us, and I was grateful as a minister for the support that the fitness industry gave to us as a government. But you would be so well placed to get behind that national drive to bring businesses behind a new national ambition set by government. I think Jeremy needs to actually go further than we've done before. Make increasing physical activity a central mission of the Department of Health. That is what we need. That is the kind of change that we need if we're going to get the culture change. I have been in the same position as Anna, where lots of good ideas, but without the commitment from the top of the government, this whole area becomes bedeviled by initiative-itis, good little schemes that dry up with a change of minister or change of government without making a significant difference, and that just frustrates all of you. I know that. And there is still, sadly, though, the mentality in Whitehall that says spending in this area is, quotes, a luxury we can't afford, as the sports minister said when he scrapped the free swimming scheme. My argument is precisely the opposite. The most cost-effective way of making our public services sustainable in the century of the ageing society is to build a more active nation. We should spend the pennies that it costs to put people on their feet or to get them in the pool, rather than the tens of thousands of pounds it costs to keep them in hospital beds. It is the cheapest route to good health and well-being for the whole population, and the easiest way to make the NHS sustainable in the years to come. It's the best way to change a frightening vision of the future, where some experts predict that today's children may be the first generation to have shorter life expectancy than their parents. Almost a quarter of our children are either overweight or obese when they start school. That is a terrible statistic. What many people in government, and particularly in the education department, fail to grasp is that it isn't just this terrible statistic, isn't just storing up problems for those children's future health, it's also likely to limit their potential, their academic achievement, and their life chances. They miss more school days, achieve lower exam results, and are more likely to see themselves as poor students. Once they reach the world of work, they earn up to 18% less than people of normal weight. They take more days off, claim more disability benefits, tend to be less productive. Severely obese people die 8 to 10 years sooner than those of normal weight, similar to smokers, with every extra 15 kilograms increasing the risk of early death by approximately 30%. And worst of all, children with inactive parents are twice as likely to be obese as adults. Unless we break the cycle of physical inactivity, the costs to the economy and to the NHS will rise rapidly in the coming years. Dr. George Albee said this, quote, "No mass disorder afflicting mankind is ever brought under control or eliminated by attempts at treating the individual." We need culture change across our society. Culture change in communities, with the pedestrian and the cyclist prioritised over the motorist. Culture change in schools, with sport and activity a feature of every single school day. Culture change in the media, especially around the broadcasting of women's sport. And culture change in Whitehall, with all departments signing up to the new national ambition led by the Department of Health. So let me take each of those 4 areas in turn. First, culture change in communities. The collision involving Bradley Wiggins, the road crash, and his coach, Shane Sutton, have underlined what has been clear for some time. Streets have become places where pedestrians and cyclists play second fiddle to cars. In the last year, we've seen a 12% increase in pedestrians killed on our roads and 88 cyclists losing their lives. 34% of primary school children go to school by car. An integral part of a proper physical activity strategy must involve councils taking a more ambitious approach to public health, and I think that means reprioritising the roads, thinking about road safety, prioritising the cyclist and pedestrian over the motorist. And as my colleague Maria Eagle, Shadow Transport Secretary, has said, there are practical things we could do straight away. Restore the targets on cutting deaths and injuries on our roads that the government cut, and implement the Times Cities Fit for Cyclists campaign manifesto, where some European cities, like Brussels, close their entire streets to cars over a weekend so that cyclists and pedestrians get the run of the place. And why don't we do things like that here? Why don't we support councils who want to impose a 20-mile speed limit across their residential areas to make it safer for children and cyclists? And that difference of 10 miles per hour can make all the difference. These are the kind of things that will bring culture change in our communities. Let me talk about culture change in our schools. Contrary to what Anna was saying, I believe that Mr. Gove seems to be intent on punishing the current generation for his own unhappy memories of school sport. He is getting rid of the requirements that we introduced on playing fields, has overridden the independent panel's conclusions on playing fields on a number of occasions. He's scrapped 2 hours a week of compulsory PE in schools. Then going further into nutrition, he's removed the requirement to provide nutritious food to children in academies and free schools. He's abolished the Healthy Schools programme. I will stop going on because you get the general picture. And then there's this statistic. It's no surprise, is it, that the Women's Sport and Fitness Foundation published a survey earlier this year that found that 12% of 14-year-old girls are reaching recommended levels of physical activity, half the number of boys at their age. And this is despite 3/4 of girls saying they would like to be more active. You know, it is time to put school sport at the centre of the education system, not at the fringes. Give every child a proper introduction to sport, proper coaching, proper opportunities to compete. Give them activities that they want to do, as Anna was saying, not just the traditional sports. If you give every child that proper introduction to sport, you give them the confidence to be active throughout their lives. If they understand basic technique in tennis, in cricket, in all of the sports, you know, they can go on and be confident members of local clubs. We're not doing that, and that's what we should be doing, a proper start for every child. I mentioned the media, and let me come on to culture change in the media. Women's sport was the story of London 2012, and that directly challenges the norms that have existed in the British media and also in the BBC. Their coverage was magnificent, but the most remarkable thing about it was just how different it is from normal output. Outside of the Olympics, the profile given to women's sport and women sports people by all media outlets is at best sporadic and at worst negligible. And this failure to serve half the population just can't go on. The traditional excuse, no one's interested in women's sport, was smashed to bits by Jade Jones, Nicola Adams, and Jessica Ennis. They lit up our screens, exposing the lie of last year's BBC Sports Personality of the Year, that the only interesting personalities in sport are male. A Women's Sport and Fitness Foundation survey found that 81% of adults believe sportswomen were better role models than any other celebrities. And never again should it be necessary for me, together with a Conservative colleague, to ask the BBC to move a Women's Football World Cup quarter-final from the red button to BBC Two, as I had to do last year. With minimal promotion, it got an audience of 3 million, more, I would wager, than the rerun of Porridge that they were planning to show. I come from a family of 3 boys. I've got 2 brothers, you know, and I've now got 2 girls. And I look for the sporting role models to put before them, and I can't find them in the same way. So I've been re-educated on this whole, as somebody who's very interested in very male-centric approach to sport. We need to do much more, and I'm looking to the national broadcaster to set the change. So fourth, I'll finish with the culture change in Whitehall. Finally, you know, if any of this is to come together, the things I'm talking about, it can't be the case anymore that physical activity is that orphan in Whitehall. Somebody must get a grip and take the lead. The Department of Health has to be the key department leading this. DCMS just doesn't have the budget. You know, DCMS has to focus on the formal organised sports structure, the pyramid. That's its job. It should focus on that, working with governing bodies. It's the Department of Health, with all of its resources, that must move in a big way into physical activity, everyday activity. That is its responsibility to build a healthier nation. Wish Anna all the luck in the world to move those mindsets in the department. The day I moved from culture to DH, I said, from now on, promoting physical activity will be core business of the Department of Health. And I was greeted by a whole load of blank looks around the table from the senior management team, thinking, what on earth is he going on about? And of course, they changed at the minute I was out of the door. This change has to happen, and it has to happen soon. So in conclusion, John, imagine the benefits to us all if we had a more physically active society. Children achieving more in their life, getting better exam results, fulfilling their potential, less likely to smoke, use drugs, contract heart disease or diabetes. You know, moving from inactivity to activity is the easiest lifestyle change to make. It's much easier than stopping smoking, reducing drinking, or changing diet, and it costs next to nothing. And the great benefit about physical activity is that it then makes it more likely that people will make those other health changes. They'll then stop smoking or drink a little bit less. That's the great benefit of it. And that is why it should be the preeminent public health target. Rather than the DH finger-wagging about alcohol and smoking and trying to change things that probably won't change very quickly, make a positive statement around physical activity, because if people get active, they're much more likely to make all of those other healthier choices too. And in public policy terms, in public spending terms, there are major returns for the government and for us all if we move those numbers from a quarter up to a half. The old mentality that this is a luxury we can't afford just cannot carry on. So let's use this Olympic legacy and let's use this post-Olympic moment in a cross-party way to change this culture for good and make physical activity the core business of government. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy. Having thrown a massive boulder in the direction of the BBC, I would just like to say that, of course, the Olympics were won during the course of the Labour government in 2005, and you could have put sport at the centre of the school system then, and it still remained on the margins then and hasn't moved. I think we did. So anyway, but anyway, questions from the floor. One there. Lost for words. Question on the left first, and then 83,000 other questions to rattle through. So could we get to that gentleman there, please, and the other microphone up the front? Yeah.
Hello, Dave Wright from CFM MyZone. Andy, and that's a good point regarding Labor being in government. There are reportedly 1 million visits to an NHS every day, costs of about £18 a visit, £6.5 billion cost per year. If 10% of that was related to health and what our industry can actually fix, that's £600 million that we could actually save the actual NHS. So I suppose that's one thing. The question is, and 99% of businesses are SMEs, we all know that. Yet, if as an employer, if I buy a gym membership or the local council or whatever, for my employees, not only do I get taxed for it, but my employees get taxed for it, P11D. Mm-hmm. Now, so I suppose what we're trying to say is, hey, don't give us money, but don't tax us for looking after the health of our employees, unless if we're a big organisation where we can afford to build a gym in our facilities, but which, as I said...
That's an interesting point you make there, and that's just, if you like, almost a peripheral point, but it's the same thing about joined-up thinking, isn't it? Yep. That if there's not a total... Everybody buys into the fact that physical activity is important, then you will always have these anomalies, and actually, we're not going anywhere.
I agree, John, absolutely. That's why I said this national ambition shouldn't just be something that government imposes on you all. It should be jointly signed by business, charities, community organisations, individuals who want to make the change. You know, it's got to be a national drive where everyone plays their part and imaginative ways of achieving it, where business says, look, if we do that, can you let us off some tax over there? Those are exactly the kind of things that I want to see. And that thinking just isn't there in Whitehall. I mean, the free swimming scheme cost pennies in public spending terms. My own council, the People's Republic of Wigan, we did it without any government subsidy. You know, they opened their pools to kids and OAPs for free. They just found a way of doing it. And yet, you know, that's the first thing we scrap, and it was really successful in starting to change things. I think we often come up with these complicated little schemes, but free swimming had the virtue of being clear, obvious, something everybody can understand is there for them. And I think it's those kind of things that change behaviour. And just to answer John, we did put school sport at that. We built a fantastic...
He's been waiting to do, you could see he was waiting.
Well, OK, we didn't get everything right, and it could have been more. And I had to battle a bit in the early days of the government to get school sport on the agenda. But we did build a pretty good school sports system. And for God's sake, before it goes, please let the government come in, get that school sports partnership system back in place, because that will deliver massive dividends for us in the future.
Can I ask one question? We'll come to this lady in the front row. You painted a great nirvana about the physical health of the future, but you talked about local authorities and cycle routes and things like that. If local authorities, you know, a lot of local authorities are not as forward-thinking as others, I think it's fair to say. Yep. A lot of lacking dynamism and vitality. Would you like to see penalties imposed on local authorities if they didn't do things like that?
Well, that's a good question, but I think there's an even prior kind of issue than that. You know, local authorities have lots of statutory responsibilities. Sport and recreation isn't one of them. They have a statutory responsibility to provide libraries. They have no responsibility in law to provide playing fields, leisure centres. They do it because they can see it's for the benefit of their community, but there isn't a requirement. And then in the era when they're all facing eye-watering cuts, sadly, it's the first thing to go. You know, nothing depressed me more than looking at the playing field that's near the back of my house in Wigan, where the grass they don't cut the grass as often now. And this was about 1 week after the Olympics, and the grass was kind of like knee-high. You know, that's simple, isn't it? And just, you know, because of these things, the incentives aren't right to prioritise physical activity, and that is a crying shame.
Okay, listen, we've got lots of questions, so we'll rattle through them as quick as we can. Lady here.
Okay, hello, Kate Bickford, Forever Health Products. Just a couple of things. Sport in schools ended up not being competitive because it was all about the taking part. Tell that to the athletes that won the medals, you know. But my question is, if you're going to take sport into schools, what are you going to lose? Unless you extend their day, my kids are very lucky because they're privately educated. Their day starts at 8:30. They finish at 4:30. They have a lot of sport. But in a lot of the state schools, they finish at 3:30. What are you going to do? Because they're under pressure to get exam results. That's what parents look at to choose the school that their kids are going to go to. So what are you going to cut to give them an hour sport every other day?
Well, or would you advocate extending the school day?
Well, I certainly
exactly.
would. But with respect, I think there are a lot of myths about sport in state schools, and you've just repeated some of them. I'm going from here today, going home to watch my son play in a competitive rugby league match. We have a vibrant...
Yeah,
wait a second. We have a vibrant...
What are you going to cut to get sport into schools?
I'll come on to your question, but look at the statistics. Competitive sport in the last decade, the number of kids taking part in inter-school competitive fixtures increased significantly. Not as high as I would like, but it had a big revival in the last decade. And, you know, I want to see all children with those opportunities. Yes, extend the school day, bring in more volunteers if necessary. Absolutely agree with you. There must be a way of making it possible to make sport and activity be a feature of every single school day for the kids who want to arrive early or the kids who want to stay late. I don't disagree with the point you're making, but genuinely, there was more progress in state schools in the last decade than I think you've recognised.
Okay, gentleman there.
Ben Constable, Sole Trader, Forward Sports. You mentioned about children sort of playing sports in schools. You mentioned one of the competitors of the Olympics of my sport, Jade Jones. That's an individual sport she does, and there's not many individual sports within high schools and things. And I think that puts off a lot of young people, because when I was going through high school, I was not very good at team sports at all. And I'm just wondering, would it be better maybe to promote more individual sports in secondary education as well as the team sports? Because I also teach air cadets, and they always talk to me about the opportunities about doing more individual sports, and they would get involved within it if they had that opportunity.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you make a very important point. I mean, I don't want to say, in the same way to the last question, that everything is perfect, but if you look again at the statistics, the school sports survey for the last decade, it showed that the average number of sports being offered by secondary schools increased quite significantly Again, was it good enough? Probably not. But it began, as they extended, it went into many more individual sports being offered, because schools, I think, do, as a default position, think of team sports. Probably they're a bit easier. But also they bring something around teamwork and other values that perhaps they don't get from other things. One thing that I think was very worrying about the Olympics, and I'm hearing stories of, athletics clubs with queues of kids they can't deal with at the moment, rowing clubs with queues of kids they can't deal with, cycling clubs with queues of kids they can't deal with. You know, perhaps they're not getting those things in school and the clubs can't deal either. Surely somebody should have thought about that.
Well, can I chip in on that and just say, actually, because do you think, and we do have people here from national governing bodies, do you think that national governing bodies, I mean, it sounds absurd to say they were almost taken by surprise by the Olympic Games, but they didn't put in place what needed to be in place for what was going to be the inevitable consequence of the Games. And as a consequence of which, they're reaping the rewards, or the lack of them now.
I think that has proved to be true, John. And I think you know, I've heard that anecdotally in my constituency. I heard last week that Lee Harriers Athletics Club have a waiting list of about 60 to 100 kids. They just can't give them opportunities. And you do wonder, what were the governing bodies doing?
Well, they will go away, that's the trouble.
Okay, maybe they'll say they don't have enough money, they don't have enough volunteers. I understand that, but surely somebody should have seen this coming, because we all knew, particularly rowing and cycling, were going to be right up there in the Olympic spotlight.
One in the corner, yes, sir. I know this. Well, listen, we'll rattle through these very quickly because Andy has to go back to the Commons and elsewhere. But so we'll do these. If you could be brief in your questions, I'm sure he'll be brief in his answers. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Hi, it's Scott Hodson here from Trainer Nation. First of all, I love ukactive. Brilliant brand. I think everybody can get behind it. As ever, Dave Wright is very wise on his numbers about the cost of inactivity to the NHS. The biggest barrier that I have helping health and fitness professionals connect with more people is actually the mood of people, and that stops them getting into our industry and becoming active. The biggest effector on mood and attitude is sugar. And could you write to Jeremy Hunt and ask him to ban the advertising of sugar in schools and on TV, please?
You weren't expecting that question, be honest. That came slightly left field.
I wasn't expecting that question, but it's a good question. And I'm going to actually say something different, to be honest, because I've been thinking about the point that you made. I look back on our own time in government, and I think we had a pretty good record on tobacco in terms of public health, but a pretty mixed to poor record on alcohol and food. And actually the voluntary approaches with food, to me, don't seem to be working. That's what I've concluded coming through. You know, there's all good intention on labelling, never really come to anything. And in the end of the day, is that really going to get the change that we need? You know, all parents will do it. I do it too. Look at the sugar on those boxes of cereal that you buy for your kids. It is, you know, they're in the 30s%, some of them in the high 30s, the sugar in fizzy drinks. I'm launching Labour's public health review next week, and as part of that, I'm going to ask the question, is it time for maximum legal limits on the sugar content of cereals, fizzy drinks, and other products aimed at children?
Interesting. Okay, last three. We'll go 1, 2, 3. Yes, lady there.
Midge Blake from Sports Leaders UK. I have to say it may be more competitive sport in secondary schools, but I have direct experience of my daughter who's dyslexic. And when I was having a parents' evening talk with the teacher and saying, but she's really good at sport, isn't she? Although she's not good at, you know, maths and she couldn't write at that stage, she's really good at sport. And I was told by the teacher that sport was not important, which did result in me actually changing schools. But I did just want to say, I mean, one of the things we're doing at Sports Leaders UK, and it's interesting that we've had a government grant from the Office for Civil Society, is to set up an energy club programme. And that is available to every primary school in the country, 900 at first, but we're seeking further funding. And it's a free programme, training up volunteers to run fun physical activity sessions for schools. So if any of the people here in this room are parents, I would encourage them to visit our website, Energy Club, because we're giving free training to parents to help make a difference outside of school time.
Good
and
stuff.
it's one step.
Thank you. All right, lady at the back, yeah.
Hi, I'm Jo Sargent. I work for HealthWorks Sodexo. It's a corporate gym that I manage. I think you talk a lot of sense, and we all know the figures that you've been talking about. We've known them for the last 10 years or so, and they're not changing. I work for a company. There's a gym in the basement. It's free to everybody who works there, and yet people still can't give up 30 minutes of their lunch break to do a Pilates class. So they're all quite affluent working there. So if that's being reflected to the children, I think there's a very big concentration on the children. But the parents can't even get active. I don't, you know, would anyone in this room be doing their 150 minutes a week? And if the affluent members of society can't get down to a Pilates class, the less affluent members of society, how are you expecting to engage them?
Okay, how do you educate the parents is what the question is.
Well, you know, I think Change for Life was a programme that was meant to be a kind of programme owned by government and businesses and everybody, which I think was beginning to get somewhere, and I hope the government might put some new life into that, because I think that was beginning to make a bit of a difference. I think you make a really good point. I mean, I would link it back to the food issue as well, actually. I mean, I think part of the problem is people they don't feel confident to get active because, you know, there's obesity levels are far too high. So these two things I think need to be seen together, food policy and physical activity policy alongside each other. I just think we need to perhaps say very clearly the consequences of physical inactivity in terms of diabetes, life expectancy. We maybe need to be a bit harder hitting maybe in those messages. But I don't think it is an income thing. Anybody can get physically active. Yeah, people could go to a gym like yours, but also they could just put the trainers on and go, you know, go for a walk or go for a run. It's possible to get physically active without going to a gym. And I just think we need to get that simple message out, that simple support to get people going. It doesn't cost a lot of money.
Okay, listen, I must stop there. Let's go, the clock's going to beat us. Last question from the front, sir.
Pete Todd, Pontefract Squash and Leisure Club, home of current world's #1 squash player, James Willstrop, and also UK Active Board Director. I think health and somebody's health transcends politics, and basically you've got to cut it at source. So there's a wonderful quote, give me a child from 0 to 5 and I'll give you the man. So basically, go past school, get back to when you're born. That's where you need to be active. Our member, our oldest is 92, and our youngest is 18 months, and she does baby ballet. So what are we doing to imprint it into the DNA? Because like parents and everything else, it's all right. This is all reactive. Doctors' surgeries, exercise referral, it's all reactive. Let's get proactive right at birth and imprint it into the DNA. So how are we going to do that?
Well, it's I can see a very authoritarian Labour initiative coming on here. You know, mandatory, compulsory swimming for kids. And,
compulsory baby ballet for 18-month-olds. Yeah.
But no, I don't disagree with the point that you're making. I think you said at the beginning it transcends politics, and that's why I just tried to. I mean, while I've made quite a provocative speech today, deliberately so, I did at the core of it call for a cross-party national ambition, because that is the only thing, it seems to me, having had a lot of experience in Whitehall, having battled those civil servants in education and health and all those people who could make the policies that you're talking about, you know, we haven't got through to them. So we have to set it as a proper national objective that drives that culture change right the way down to the start of life. And that's what, you know, that's what I would, my best answer to you.
Can I just say, Andy, just as a final point, in a sense, for the message that you can give to all the health industry workers, if you like, people who run companies, people who run gyms, people who are involved in the fitness industry across the board, what is your message to them about what they can do? Because we've asked you what you can do, but what can they do?
Well, I think they do a lot, actually. I think, you know, I don't want to sound negative today. I think the fitness industry has made a massive contribution in recent years in this country, as has the events industry, you know, putting on 10Ks and other things. There's a massive, I think, awareness. You know, there's a population of this country who are very engaged in all of that. The industry I always found very engaging when I was in government with ideas about could PCTs buy more time in our gyms. That's the way to do it, isn't it? But maybe add your voice through UK Active to this call for a national drive, a national mission, or at local level, go to the new commissioners in health and say, look, why don't you commission 6 hours in our gym for old age pensioners this week? Or, you know, why don't you do something different with the changes that are coming? So at local level, at national level, keep banging away. I think this industry has made a lot of change, actually. We are a lot further on in our thinking about sport and activity than we were, but this is a moment not to miss.
Excellent. We must leave it there. Andy Burnham, thank you very much for being here today.